Hello, my name is Maria Bezubova and you're at my channel Fertilizers Jazz. Here we talk about events, trends, technologies in the world of fertilizers and agriculture. Please subscribe to the channel, put a like to this video, and let's jazz! Today I'm thrilled to host again a super cool guest, Christopher Hyde, meteorologist and senior sales manager at Meteomatics. And we will discuss weather patterns and forecasts for the key agricultural regions, which is of course one of the key drivers of fertilizers application and general success of agricultural season at the end of the day. I'm happy to welcome you, Christopher, and thank you very much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me again. I appreciate it. Look forward to our conversation.
Indeed, me too. Chris, last time when we met here in Fertilizers Jazz, it was in fourth quarter of previous year, and we were discussing and expecting that La Nina will arrive and replace El Nino. That was raining actually for a long time. So did it happen? Has La Nina really arrived, and what is the effect until now?
Yeah, it did happen. It took a while for it to materialize. It was a very weak La Nina that occurred early in 2025. And it did have some minor impacts across primarily South America, here in North America, the US, Southern Canada, and also over in the Black Sea area, Ukraine, Southern Russia, with respect to the impacts to weather. So, for example, in the US and Canada, there was some dryness that occurred across the upper Midwest with a lack of precipitation. And we were worried that if the La Nina were to continue that direction, that there would be some impacts to the start of the growing season or the growing season itself across North America. However, the La Nina, because it was so quick, it dissipated back to the what's called the neutral phase. There's really no La Nina or El Nino. It's kind of exactly normal or in between. Because of that dissipation and an uptick in precipitation, the dryness that we were monitoring earlier this year, which we thought there was a threat if the La Nina were to continue with an impact to the crop, that waned for sure. I think all expectations are, unless there's something that surfaces later this summer, that there's going to be a pretty healthy crop across parts of the U.S. Midwest this year.
Indeed. So what do you expect? Now we will be living in this normal situation for how long? Shall we expect another La Nina, El Nina, or not?
Yeah, I think the expectation to have a La Nina reoccur probably won't be until later this year, around the winter time, Q4, Q1 next year. I think it's going to be another weak one. I don't think it's going to be a full-blown moderate to strong La Nina. So whenever these INSO phase types monitoring the water temperatures in the Central Pacific, having a bearing of weather downstream, such as in North America, such as South America, not as many impacts further downstream in Europe and the Black Sea area, for example. Certainly Australia having impacts, and Southeast Asia with whatever happens in the Central Pacific. But whenever they're in their weak phase types, the direct correlation with the weather is not as high. You typically have a lot more volatility going on in across all these regions, especially the further displaced you are downstream. So the textbook example of La Nina is probably not going to be relevant again because of the amount of volatility. You will have periods of dryness, for example, across the US Midwest and across parts of South America. You will have periods of wetness in Australia, for example, where that typically correlates. But you won't have long duration events. You won't have as extreme events because of the amount of volatility that occurs overall. Take the US, for example, this summer, where the amount of volatility that we had in temperatures were very noticeable. We had a relatively cool start to June. Late June, the intensity of the temperatures were record levels in parts of the US. And then we went back to early July, back to being cool again. And then late July, back to being warm again. So the ups and downs in temperatures, I think, as well as precipitation patterns, are going to be the rule as we head into another weak La Nina, and it could very well be brief again. We'll have to monitor that as we get a little closer in time.
I see. I see. You already started to explain how is the situation in the US, and indeed, this year it is very, very interesting to monitor what is happening in the US. Because this year US agri producers have sown the record corn acreage ever. And the
Right.
first expectations in terms of yield, as far as I see, it is also record. And wheat looks also good after recent scout tours from the fields. So, how do you see? Do you confirm that this trend is indeed happening? Should we expect really good or record yields from the US?
Yes, I would absolutely agree with that. I would say right around normal, if not record, in some cases. The timing, to go back to the timing of the volatility, I think that was key in overall. The key corn pollination period across the early part of July in the Corn Belt, for example, that was around the same timing where temperatures cooled off a bit. So if the temperatures were to remain very intense as far as heat goes from June into early July, I think that would have been a different story as far as what we're talking about here, Maria, on the potential record yields. So I think the timing was really key in those temperatures in the key population areas. The precipitation patterns, they tend to ease off a bit with respect to bountiful amounts of precipitation. Unfortunately, we had areas well south of the main producing area, like Texas, for example, that had record flooding in that area. High resolution weather modeling would have been a really key factor, not only for areas of Texas that certainly the rains impacted areas like the cotton crop, for example, and on the soft side of things, but also you use high resolution weather modeling for derechos, and derechos have been a story across the Midwest. They've had little impacts thus far, but certainly things to monitor as we head into the latter part of the summer towards the harvest season. So to go back to your question on record yields, absolutely, I think that is the case going to percolate across the Midwest, especially as we get towards the latter part of the summer, towards harvest, unless all of a sudden we have the precipitation patterns come back. That's going to have a major impact. I think we're out of the area of the heat threats for now. So I think we're just kind of going to monitor precipitation for the most part. And going forward towards harvest time for the remainder of Q3, I think, again, temperatures aren't going to be a big problem across the US or Canada for that matter. I think as above to seasonal averages. And precipitation will probably be relatively dry across the western part of the corn and bean belt into the Canadian prairies. Maybe the far eastern Midwest might have some issues with precipitation and harvest just because of the remnants of tropical weather coming in. And that's something to note too. If your listeners, viewers have interest in the crops for like in the southeast part of the US with respect to wetness, there will be an increase in tropical activity as hurricane season really ramps up, particularly starting in August and September.
I see. I see. Thank you. You already mentioned a bit Canada. Do you expect, in general, good weather for the crops there?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, the balance of the summer into Q3, very good weather across most of the Canadian prairies. I don't foresee any major issues as far as harvest goes. I think seasonal temperatures and drier than normal weather should prevail for that particular region.
I see. I see. Let's move to Latin America now, another most important region after the Northern America, for sure. And this during the first half year this year, Brazil and Argentina, key agri producers of the region, really experienced quite tough weather conditions, both heavy rainfalls at first, then droughts during quite important time of plant development and harvesting. So now the whole globe, I would say, is watching situation there because global crops price level will very, very much depend on quantity and quality of Latin American crops. If the crop is ample, then most likely the current low price level will persist. So what is your expectation for Q3 in terms of weather patterns there in that region?
Yeah, Q3 has is definitely associated with how the planting season evolves and germination of seeds for that time of the year for them, for both corn and beans. So for right now, because the way the La Nina has not reemerged, which is a good thing as far as extreme weather for Latin America, in particular Brazil and Argentina. I think temperatures overall from our current forecast projections are looking above normal for most of the production areas across both Brazil and Argentina. So that's good. That's very favorable for planting. Precipitation, I would say, would be fairly favorable for right now as well. Mainly seasonal averages near normal across most areas. The only exception I would say would be across far southern Brazil, Rio Grande do Sul, to be specific, and Uruguay. That area, I think, has the best chance of being below normal for precipitation. So we'll have to watch to see if that area widens out in, say, northeastern Brazil, or even penetrates further north into more of southern Brazil. But for right now, the major areas like Mato Grosso in south central Brazil looks to be pretty favorable as far as the planting season, or Q3 in general.
Okay, that's good to hear. Maybe not that good to hear in terms of price level for crops producers, but yeah, that's it is what it is. So let's move to Europe now. Most of the European countries and UK as well have already experienced heat wave at the beginning of the summer, a huge heat wave. In some countries, especially in south of Europe, crops seem to suffer a lot. That's what I hear specifically from Black Sea producers. All of them suffer a lot in terms of quality and quantity as well. So apart from that, some never seen effects of, I don't know, what is that, climate change or just weather patterns we see happening. For example, Ukraine is now under attack of Egyptian locust. It's the first time in my life that I hear about such a problem. So how do you see weather patterns further in Europe and in different parts of Europe? And maybe you see also some long-term effects like this locust or other problems that can arrive from, I don't know, La Nina, El Nina phenomenon or some other things.
Yeah, this was an area of the world that the forecast projections for the season was pretty spot on because of the dry soil moisture conditions. Really didn't change too much across Eastern Europe, Southeast Europe, and even further east across the Black Sea area in Ukraine and southern Russia, for that matter. So that's an area that, because the drier the soil moisture conditions, providing you have the right ridge of high pressure in place, it tends to enhance high temperatures. And that's exactly what happened across much of Europe. It certainly was more widespread, including Western Europe earlier in the summer. And then as the summer went on, you're exactly right. I mean, Southeastern Europe, Southern Europe, and even further east around the Black Sea was very warm and was sustained warm in some regards. Even as we're speaking, it remains very, very warm with a record to much above normal temperature. So I think, unfortunately, depending on your point of view, that trend is going to continue for Q3 as far as the temperatures go. The dryness, I think, will be the case primarily around the Black Sea area for Q3. So certainly from a harvest standpoint, there's not going to be any issues with the weather. However, to your point on the quality of the crop, how much crop are you going to be able to harvest with respect to the impacts that occurred this summer, especially the further south and east you go across the European continent. There is a trend as time goes on from a climatological standpoint beyond the next few months that the last several growing seasons, the last decade really, it has been very warm for the most part and very dry in most areas. Where that trend we feel is going to continue. This is an area of the world that climate change has a huge impact. And you have areas of the European continent that the growing season is kind of shifting northward in some areas, where you could have a longer growing season than typical for areas further north that's more favorable for them. However, areas further south, the opposite effect, where you have a drier and a not so much favorable weather condition set in for that growing area. And it may be a long, lengthy one. However, the conditions just aren't favorable, again, to your point earlier on quality of the crop. And unfortunately, there's going to be areas that the quality and the end result of the crop is not going to be very favorable as we head towards harvest. So that climate impact trend does impact things and attract things like certain pests, like locusts. The direction of the wind matters. If it's coming from the south across the desert areas in northern Africa, for example, that prevailing wind tends to attract pests such as locusts into areas that typically don't have that area, and they thrive on dry conditions overall. So unfortunately, the trends for the long term in climate are not so much favorable in respect to of any area in the world. It would probably be Europe, unfortunately, with the way things are going.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. That you are completely right. We see exactly what you mentioned, moving of the growing belts. In Ukraine, we are monitoring it for already a couple of years. Clearly, the south of the country is already not the main belt because of the problems with precipitation, and obviously irrigation system is something that governments in multiple need to look very, very intensively in upcoming years. That's for sure. And hopefully no locust anymore.
Yeah, cross our fingers, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Let's move to the next important geographical point. It's Asia, of course. And I propose to focus a bit on India because at the moment, India is just in the middle of its agricultural season. This year, we see that monsoon has arrived a bit earlier than usually, or let's say than planned. And it seems to be quite healthy, which is very good. Also for the fertilizers, of course. So how do you see weather patterns in Southeast Asia developing in upcoming months?
Yeah, I think the monsoon will continue across India, especially the western parts of the country in particular, over the next few months, or the balance of the so-called monsoon rainy season. I think elsewhere across the country and elsewhere across Asia, for the most part, seasonal precipitation I think above normal temperatures will be the rule where areas aren't quite as robust with the precipitation. So I think mainly seasonal temperatures will be the rule across India. So we'll have to watch, at times the Indian monsoon might be a little bit too wet and have an impact on the crop there. So we'll have to monitor the intensity at times of that over the next few months. That coincides a little bit with the La Nina, but because La Nina again is going to be closer to neutral and not going to be, crossing that threshold in the La Nina until a lot later in the year. I think that's not going to have as much of an influence on the compared to like the local effects across India as far as the monsoon goes.
I see. And if we move also in Asia, but to the different region a bit, and look at the situation in Australia,
Yes.
another super important country for global agriculture, of course. So in the first half of this year, we have seen extreme dryness across the country, and all agri producers were very much concerned about not enough precipitation, and they were waiting and waiting and waiting. They were not applying fertilizers because they just were not able to do that. So how do you see the situation now? Did it change already, and will it change to the positive further in Q3?
Yeah, there has been some signs of a change. I think it'll be much more noticeable as we head into Q3. Uh, and again, this is an area of the world that has probably the most direct impact from a El Nino or La Nina. And it's usually an area of the world that has the onset the quickest. It's sort of like a litmus test with the rest of the world downstream of La Nina or El Nina conditions. So, again, going back to the thought process that La Nina will likely emerge as the year progresses, albeit at a week, we're forecasting precipitation to be above normal for much of Australia, particularly the areas in the south and east part of the country where the major producing areas are located. So favorable precipitation, certainly more of an earnest uptick in precipitation in that part of Australia. Elsewhere near normal, I'd say even further north in northern Australia and to around Indonesia. That's an area probably a noticeable increase in precipitation too in Q3. And I think even beyond Q3, again, depending on the increase in La Nina, the precipitation will probably continue to be above normal there as well.
I see. I see. Thank you very much, Chris, for this super insightful, as usually, discussion. But I would like to finalize it with something a bit more personal rather than pure business related. Couple of small blitz questions at the end,
Okay.
so that the viewers will learn a bit more about yourself. So my first question would be, after many years already in meteorology, what is that still inspires and surprises you?
Yeah, what inspires me is the technical aspects of the science, where, when I started over a couple decades ago, 27 years ago, the thought of having a 11 to 15 day forecast, for example, was unheard of because we only had limited amount of weather models that we use as guidance. So the science has really evolved to the point of having multiple updates of a extended forecast beyond the next 10 days, having multiple updates of a subseasonal or a seasonal forecast as well. The verification, the further you would go out, has gotten a lot better over the last few decades. There's a variety of ways that we do a number of different research to modify certain models. So I think the overall science of meteorology has gotten better, and understanding more and more. I think people find the cross the threshold going from weather meteorology to climatology, and wanting to understand the trends and changes in climatology. To our point earlier, talking about the trends across Europe and the change in climatology there. I think that's something that no one talked about beyond the next 10 to 15 days, say a couple of decades ago. And I think just the state of the science is pretty exciting with how things have advanced over time.
Yeah, cool, cool. My next question is this. If you can master one myth about meteorology and or meteorologist industry, what would it be?
Well, I would say, a lot of people's perception, whether you're a meteorologist on television, where you can get the forecast wrong and still get a paycheck. So meteorology is not perfect. I think most people understand that. However, there are people that don't realize how difficult it is to forecast, certainly still on the short term, even though, to my point earlier, the science has gotten better. The short term could be a surprise sometimes. I think using tools like high resolution weather modeling, our 1K models that we have at Meteomatics, really helps in forecasting localized impacts, such as a derecho that impacts parts of the U.S. Midwest with respect to energy or even agriculture. So I think the myths, as far as the weather person, meteorologist, is always wrong. It's a hard job. I learned a long time ago, never go zero or never go 100%, because the weather, yes, it's evolved over time. It's gotten better, but it's never perfect. And there's still room for improvement. So for folks that are not so favorable on meteorologists, please give them a little leeway. Please give them a little lax, and try to understand what they go through on the daily. As far as forecasting, and certain areas are more challenging than others, from ocean effects to mountainous effects, and it's still a lot more room to grow. But yeah, please give us a little leeway at times. That's all I ask.
Indeed, indeed. And finally, my final question would be this. What was the most ridiculous question you received about meteorology or weather?
Wow, that is a interesting one. Ooh, that's a tough one. I would have to say, why do you always never be consistent, or why are you always flexible in your forecasting as far as giving caveats or giving risks? And it's never cut and dry. It's exactly this or exactly that. And I wish forecasters or people who obtain weather forecasts think about it more in a probabilistic way. That there is a caution to things. There is a margin of error on things. So I would say, if people ask the question and people have asked the question to me and other meteorologists, is why can't you get it right, or why aren't you confident in this enough? And weather is a science still, right? I mean, it's never cut and dry. So I think the question of being very specific or very absolute in the forecast is one that's a little crazy, a little out there, because it is still a science. It's a developing science. Again, to my point earlier, it's a lot better than, say, a couple decades ago, and I'm witness to that. But we still have room to grow, and providing guidance and caveats, I think, and cautionary things is still part of the overall science and development of the science.
Thank you so much. It was really insightful, and it was fun as usually. So I'm sure all the viewers who will watch us learned plenty of interesting and very helpful things. I will be happy to see you here again in some time to exchange what happened, how the agricultural season actually goes. And I wish you and Meteomatics, meanwhile, a lot of success, a lot of good clients, a lot of good projects. Thank you again.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you for watching. As usually, I will leave all credentials of Chris and Meteomatics in the comments. Please let me know in the comments which other important aspects of weather patterns or climate-related questions you would like me to uncover, and I will be very glad to do so with Chris next time. Please subscribe to the channel, put like to this video, push the bell in order not to miss any updates, and see you soon.